Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're actually going to start very quickly with just a quick little video for you to show how powerful information can be. Our presentation today is on the Agile University, performing at the highest levels by streamlining administration. My name is Chris Franzino. I'm a senior solutions specialist and an ECM consultant. And this is Linda Ding. She is the program specialist for higher education with Laserfiche. We're just going to start with, again, a quick video. Hopefully a couple more people might come in this time, and then we're going to get right into our presentation. So thank you very much and enjoy. All right. Well, as we all know, information is power and can be very, very useful to every organization. With that, Linda's going to start by giving some examples of at the Agile University, and then we're going to continue from there and give you some examples that we've worked with some other schools and universities and the successes that they've had. With that, Linda, would you like to get started?
All right, thank you very much for joining us again at this late hour of the day. So we are going to go over some of the driving forces that behind a lot of the transformations that we observe today in higher education. And we're also going to talk about why administrative efficiency and excellence is so critical for saving your university's bottom line and make it more resilient to all the changes. And then we'll go over some of the basics of enterprise content management and how that's going to help your university build an information architecture. And Chris is going to go over some high-impact projects that we have been working on to share with you. And feel free to ask any questions during the presentation. We want to make it more of a conversational. But we'll also reserve some of the time towards the end to entertain your questions. So it's undeniable that higher education is undergoing a tremendous transformation right now because of the advancement in technology. For example, more and more universities are offering the online courses to the public for very little or no cost, and really challenging the traditional brick-and-mortar classroom model. And then, it's a textbook revolution, right? And it's predicted that within the next 5 years, there will no longer be the printed version available to the students. If that is true, then it's going to change tremendously the way professors convey their lecture materials to the students and how they interact with the students, right? Because it's no longer bounded to the static images videos, animations, even the interactive simulations will become a possibility for the course materials. So there's a lot of excitement happening in the classroom, but also there's a similar upheaval happening in the administrative body. So as you all know that the national tuition, right, has exceeded the $1 trillion mark. And it caused a lot of anxiety and outcry nationwide, asking why the tuition is so high. Look at a diagram conducted by Wall Street Journal. In the last 10 years, tuition has increased almost 92% compared to CPI, the Consumer Price Index, at 27%. So that's a big inflation rate. And so why the tuition is so high? And Wall Street Journal has conducted a lot of study on this topic. What they found is that a lot of universities, including public and private universities, their administrative staffing has gone up tremendously. In the last 10 years, during the same period of time when the tuition has gone up, the admin staff hiring has increased 50% higher than the instructors hiring. So Wall Street Journal, jokingly say higher education is the higher education, right? So and the Purdue, actually last Saturday I saw a Wall Street Journal saying that Purdue, now that they have 75% more of administrative staff compared to 13 years ago. So that's huge increase. And here you saw the diagram, University of Minnesota, their admin staff payroll increased 45.5%, more than any other enrollment and teaching payroll increase. So in response to that, there's a lot of buzz around the White House pushing forward a series of policies to make universities more accountable. I just came back from a national conference for the senior business officers last week in Seattle. So there's a lot of talk and discussion revolved around how business administrators, the CBOs, should be responding to those changes in general, right? And at the system level, a lot of universities looking at consolidating their purchasing or laying off middle level managers as a way to conserve administrative costs. For example, I think it's also a study by Wall Street Journal. They discovered that UC Berkeley has reduced almost $70 million since 2011 just by consolidating those resources, among other things. And for CBOs, those policies change would require more of a stringent reporting and audit requirements ready. So the question is, in face of all those challenges, how would you do from an IT standpoint of view to prepare your universities become more resilient in face of all these pounding waves on higher education? You might be familiar with, from a project management standpoint of view, the Agile methodology, which is a strategy to remove boundaries and barriers so that the change agent can be more responsive to any requirements or innovations. So apply the agility concept, universities can address the following 3 areas effectively to become more responsive. So the first is to make the information more accessible across the campus. Now, higher education is notorious for information silos, right? And the students' enrollment services down the hallway might not even talk to the financial aid on the other end of the hallway. And so that becomes very mission critical if we want to improve the efficiencies at the university level. And second is the automated workflow. And this is where we see a lot of opportunities to meet the increased workload demand without adding more administrative staff. And the third area is protecting institutional information. With the proliferation of digital information and the cyber attacks, and this becomes critically important, not only for now, but in the past and for the future. With that said, a lot of universities starting to look into implementing new enterprise content management as a way to meet those challenges and solve these three areas of missions. So I talked to a lot of IT leaders and directors about ECM. What I found is that there are a lot of different views and understanding of what ECM is really about. So since we're in room 101, I thought it might be appropriate to go over some fundamentals of ECM. And I like to use analogy because for adult learning, I think it just makes better association. So today, I'd like to use a building analogy to go over some of the fundamentals for ECM. And there are four major components in a good structured and designed ECM. From bottom up, the first one is records management. Second is content management, and third is business process management. And on top of that is the collaborative user interface. So we'll go over one by one right now. As I mentioned, at the bottom is your records management foundation. This is really should be the heart of your overall information management practice. And if you're running a university hospital, for example, right, you don't want to be in the press because your medical staff leak Britney Spears information, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. And also with a lot of malicious software out there, it really needs to be the foundation when you want to think about how you manage the information university and system-wide. And then you can see that a good records management practice needs a commonly agreed upon taxonomy. And this is instrumental because this is how you can reach a common agreement on how you're going to classify your university records in general. Then you can apply a process to, to your retention, scheduling, and archiving practice throughout the system. And once you have the records management practice foundation in place, then you can apply the content management framework on top of it. So content management tools includes access control, for example, where you can apply user accessibility at the group level or at the individual user level. You can even tie it in with your AD, right, Active Directory, to apply your existing security system so that everybody has the right to access information that they need to make the right decision making. So for example, the deans in the college needs to access a proposal for a grant. Then he can see a lot of secure information related to the proposal preparation, the faculty salary, right? How many hours that the faculty can get away for pursuing this proposal. And then there's also versioning tools involved in the content management. That's where you can really cut down a lot of the duplicated information. For example, especially during really time, strict contract review process, you want your legal staff to focus on revising the latest document instead of spending time looking for the latest version. And there's also tools for you to create a unified metadata across departments, so that for a common document that needs to be accessed by the admissions or registrars or financial aid, they can use any metadata they need, right, to access a shared document, say that it's a student enrollment services application, without having to create their own metadata. And that really helps you establish a more centralized way to control how information is created and the process throughout the system. So building the wall on top of the records management foundation. And then once you have the foundation of records management built and also the framework for content management in place, then you can apply a series of workflow automation tools to your information flow and the management across university. So you can, for example, you can apply automated capturing strategy to all the imported documents, including pattern matching or real-time database lookup, so that your staff members don't have to manually recognize, okay, this is the invoice or that is a student application, and really cut down a lot of manual input. And the heart of the business process management is really the workflow automation tools. And this is where I mentioned earlier is where you can really achieve meeting the challenge of increased workload without adding more administrative staff, because a lot of the process can be pushed forward through the automation without having to worry about things fall through the crack. But more importantly, what I observe is because you can see where the document is at any given time during the process, it keeps the process management very transparent, and also hold all the stakeholders involved in the process more accountable. So you can see, okay, this invoice needs to be signed off by this dean right now. It's been 3 days, he hasn't even looked at it. So send a friendly reminder instead of, don't know where it is. And then also a good ECM platform should also have the auditing and the reporting tools built in already for you. So that a lot of the information during the document process can be captured, such as your electronic signature or annotation, denoting why you made the decision, whether it's a denial or approval or needs further review. Those information can be automatically tracked. Right. So, so any kind of abnormal behavior revolved around the document or record can be notified, right, and or sending to the person that is in charge of the governance. Then largely reduce the risk of breach the data or abnormal activities. So I use this metaphor, the water pipes and the utility wire, because I really feel the workflow when it comes for the business process management is like the utility wires and the water pipes that keep the information flow throughout the organization. And the last component for the ECM is the collaboration user interface, which includes, for example, customizable portal where, for example, the students can check their financial aid status directly through their student portal without having to come into the enrollment service office directly, cutting down their time in waiting in line. And there's also the forms library where your faculty members can directly submit tenure or promotion applications online without having to submit the paper documents or coming to the office and talk to the deans and just get the process started. And there's also integration tools that you can use to link your student information system, ERP system, or your SharePoint together, so that the information in those disparate systems can be connected. And this really help cut down a lot of the silos and making information more accessible. With that said, you're really building an information building whose meaning and the function will be clearly conveyed through the architecture, how it's designed. And now Chris will be sharing with you some of the projects that we're working with universities and demonstrating some of the components I just went through.
Can I get your
mic
real quick? We're just going to switch mics, make it easier. Hello. See, I don't really need this thing at all. So today, Linda brought up a couple of really good points. The purpose of this ECM platform is to consolidate and to give you workflow and business process automation for every area of the university. We're going to show you a couple of different things today, right now, and some examples that we've been working on. And one of the things that you're seeing here is a faculty contract for the USC, the University of Southern California. And what you're actually seeing here is an example of a scanning interface that's provided in an ECM platform like Laserfiche, where you're doing advanced data capture. So we have in the middle here this image of a standard form that's been filled out by one of our faculty members, in this case a gentleman named Tommy Trojan. And what we're seeing here is a capability for this system to do classification processing on these documents. So you can put in batches of documents and the system will be able to scan those records in, identify and classify them, and then do certain processing on those documents based on what type of form it is. In this case, what we're doing is we're actually pulling off the faculty member's name, their faculty number, and some of this other information, and we're filling out our metadata. Metadata in Laserfish is our indexing information. So what we're talking about is automated indexing of your documents at the time of capture. One of the hardest challenges that we find is that people don't want to do the indexing at the time. It's always a mentality of, hey, we'll do this later. The fact is, later usually never comes. What we're providing now is the capability to automate that indexing at the time. The reduction of data entry is a common theme that you will see across an ECM platform at all times. What we're also able to do at certain points, and I know it's a little bit difficult to see because of the size of this image here, but we're actually able to then use this field information to dynamically name our documents based off of the data that we've captured. This can be used in the generation of the documents and the records to give you a consistent filing policy, but it can also dynamically generate folder structures as well. So you don't have to be worried or concerned about how do we organize this information and do all that pre-planning. The system will do that for you, and again, it will create consistency across all of these different processes. Now, in this next image here that we're going to show, we're actually able to show you some of the tools that we're using as part of this. How come it's not coming up? I'm sorry, give me a second here. Okay, so what we're showing you here is just some of the tools and the capabilities. What we're looking at is the ability for the system to do pre-classification processing. So before anything is done, sometimes you need to do image cleanup, document cleanup. We can actually do deskewing of the documents, remove speckles, remove color, do dropouts, remove lines, do whatever processing is necessary to clean up these images. Then from there, we're actually doing something called document classification. So we're able to identify our different documents based on the criteria within them. This could be through cover sheets, it could be through barcodes. There's a lot of different technologies on how you're going to identify these forms and these documents. From here, what we're also doing now is some lookups into other databases. So we're pulling that ID number for the faculty member in this case, and now filling out the rest of the metadata and indexing information based on that. So we don't have to, again, do all of this processing at the same time. We're actually doing something called token generation, which is one of our unique processes here, and then page removal as well. So no reason to be storing blank pages or minimal data inside of the system. We just don't need to keep it. We can actually get rid of that. Very, very useful and powerful when you're doing double-sided scanning, when sometimes half of the documents don't have that double side. We're also doing OmniPage OCR, so you do have an OCR engine inside of your ECM platform, making every word on every page of every document full text searchable. So even without all of this advanced processing, the capability for a user, a student, a faculty member to go into the system and be able to search on this information and find exactly what they're looking for is something that you're going to get right out of the box in an ECM platform. As we continue to go forward, what you're showing you now is the actual folder layout that's been generated. If you remember our faculty member, Tommy Trojan, you can see that it would now be created under the folder for T. He is an active faculty member. This is under the college, and here's all the college documents in one specific repository. In a system, you can have multiple repositories all under the same platform given to different areas for different needs. The provost's office can have it, admissions, everyone can have their own repository, but you're on this shared services platform for enterprise content management. We've actually had to redact some of the information here because this is a solution that's in place right now at the university. As we go forward, this is actually another mobile solution that we're showing here, and this is an enrollment contract for a student. Now, imagine a scenario where a student gets onto academic probation. This does happen. A scenario like this, no longer does that student have to be forced to go see their advisor at the advisor's office. The advisor can now meet that student if they have a very busy schedule at a coffee shop somewhere local and bring all that student's documentation with them. Display it to them on the iPad. Make sure that they understand, in this case, the agreement that they're getting into as part of an academic contract, and then actually have them digitally sign with their finger on this document. As soon as that process is done, this record can be saved inside of the system, and now that can trigger other workflows, including notification emails, letting other faculty members know the situation, or letting their professors know what is actually going on with the student, whether they'll be continuing or not. The idea is, again, tying all of this information together, making sure that the right pieces are in front of the right people at the right time, and then pushing it to archival and storage, and then inside of the records management system for later. From here, this is actually images from our mobile device application. So you can see this is for an iPad or an iPhone. Also works on Android devices. Again, universal accessibility. It shouldn't matter which platform you're on. The system should be able to work with it. HTML5, web applications, Android, iPhone, and then of course Windows. Now, as we go forward here, what we're showing you is that some role-based record access. So based on a faculty member's roles and rights, we'll give them access to certain folders in certain areas. We have the capability within our platform to redact information in folders. So for example, if we shared a folder and some of the information in there is sensitive, I may not be allowed to see that document. To me as a user, the document would not even exist in the folder, even though from a records management standpoint it does exist there. This granularity can be taken down to redacting individual information on a piece of paper, including social security numbers. So the level of accessibility can be determined by the actual need for the use case. What you're seeing on the right is an example of our workflow designer, the capability for us to use drag and drop actions to build very powerful workflows, in this case with a branching decision based on the decision that's made, whether it's an approve or reject. And tying this all together, imagine now the student can, at their advisor's office, fill out on an iPad a change of major request. They no longer have to fill out a piece of paper. They no longer have to go to the office to submit that, wait for the response, wait for the answer. All this can be done almost instantaneously because the process has been standardized and it's following along every single time. So it makes it very, very easy for people to trigger these workflows based on them saying, I want to start this process, or by simply submitting a form. And those forms can be online forms, or it can still actually be a paper form if necessary, and we can do that advanced processing that we had shown at the beginning to then kickstart the workflow process. So again, it's about tying all of this information together, and that's the real value that we want to bring. As we go on here, this is from another one of our universities that we work with, the College of the Desert in Palm Springs. This is an example of an online form. So again, this is another way to start that process. The beautiful thing here is that you can see, well, it's a little fuzzy, but you should be able to see that you can create the consistency across all of your college colors, your logos. Everything is designed for you. It's not a generic platform in that sense. You're able to customize it. The form that you're looking at on the right is actually a dynamic form. So when the student answers specific questions, the form will actually change based on their answers and what is required next of them. You know, something as simple as, you know, are you single or are you married? And if you're single, no other options appear. If you're married, it asks you maybe some further questions. Simple things like that that become very, very powerful by, again, not confusing people on a paper form where you have sections that say for office use only, don't fill out this section. I mean, if any of, you know, everyone has to fill out a W-4, sometimes it's confusing. We want to really simplify this process for everybody. So this is just an example of an online form. You fill in and collect the information. This can now generate a physical PDF document with this data input in it. So again, using an example of a standard state, federal government form or something that's for the university that needs to be on paper, you can collect the information in a web form but still generate an actual physical paper document in your records management system, all without ever having to actually print anything. And in a world that we live in today, obviously the new students that are joining schools that are 18, 17, about to come in, these kids were raised in a very different way. They've had iPads and iPhones and Google since they can remember probably to walk. You know, there's an expectation for these things to work immediately. There's really very few people today that would expect to have to fill out a paper form, and in Linda's example, stand online to try and get information. They want it now and they expect it now. So being able to provide it in this way is extremely valuable. As we go on here, we want to show you that this is something that we have that's called transparent records management. And if I can I zoom in here? I can't zoom in. That's all right. What we're doing in this case is the folder, the form that was submitted has now generated a new folder underneath this student. What we've done is we actually create shortcuts to this information. The actual records, depending on what they are, have different retention schedules. It's part of your records management series. As part of this records management, they're going to be stored under the proper retention schedule. But all of these documents need to be in a single location for ease of accessibility to the student. This is where the student gets a shortcut to all of their different information in one location, while each different document type is retained properly according to those schedules. What we're also seeing now in the bottom right is that the initial form that was submitted actually has a link associated with it. It's tough to see here. Again, sorry for the small images, but this link here is the actual transcript from this student. So by submitting this form, the system with workflow can look up the transcript that already exists, link these two documents together, so now when this form is in front of an administrator, they have all of the information that they need to make that decision. They don't have to go looking for the different information or even go ask, hey, where is this? They can instantly have it, or of course do a search on it in the full repository if they needed to. The idea here is, again, streamlining all of this process so that students, faculty, administrators can go to single locations, be able to access what they need, and even more effectively, we can deliver it to them when they need it so they can make actionable decisions on it. So it's very, very powerful tools, but it all starts with this platform for content management. So with this, Linda's actually going to wrap up a little bit.
All right. Can you hear me? Good. So this is those are great examples. So what you just saw, you saw the faculty records management, so you saw mobile advising, and you also saw an online degree granting application process. Those are very distinct processes that are built on the same ECM platform. So those processes may look like very distinct from each other from the surface, right? But if you look at how the document is generated, how they are processed, and how decisions are made, they're very similar in nature. So usually it starts with how you capture the information, and then you classify the document, whether it's application or it's a personnel files or it's a contract. And then you automate the decision making, right? From when a person A to person B, then finally the dean signs off. Then you want to distribute. You want to find a way to distribute the decision, the outcome effectively, whether to the students or faculty or staff members. Then you want to make it, you want to make the information searchable, retrievable, more accessible. And then finally, when all documents modification is done, then you want to archive properly as a standard records. So the life cycle of a document is very similar for all these processes. When you have a good ECM foundation is built, then you can easily implement those solutions across the board. So for example, if you develop a workflow process for a procurement department, a similar workflow template, the tree structures that you saw, can easily be applied to accounts payable, for example. That really reduces your implementation and support resources, right, by offering the ECM as a shared service. Another beauty about offering ECM as a shared service is that when you have a central control of how the information is flowed, how the document is created, and how the records is retained on campus, you still give those independent departments a lot of autonomy and the flexibility they wanted so much, right? And because they are the owner of the business process, they should be able to determine how they would design their services and processes to the students and faculty members, and you give them the autonomy. So with that said, this really conclude our sessions, really quick sessions on the building an Agile university on the ECM platform. And we'd like to leave a couple of minutes to entertain your questions. Yes?
Please.
One on the previous slide where you were kind of showing that, I think you said automatically it created a new folder.
This slide right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, you're talking about every time you use a new record or whatever, it's creating a new folder.
Sure.
How do you do the permissioning on that? Or is it just automatically from the parent? Do you set it up in advance?
You can actually have our workflow engine set permissions on documents as part of a process. So normally what will happen is it will take whatever is above it and it will fall below that. So if you have access, in this case, to the AB document that's above here, or this folder, then you would have access to all the subsequent folders below it based on the hierarchy. But you can actually set and remove specific access rights as part of a workflow to make sure that, again, it's only being seen by those that it's appropriate. Yeah. And we do try to recommend that you build the folder structures in the way that you don't have to always do that specialized access rights assignment, but in certain cases it may be necessary, but it can be determined as part of an identification of a document based on its contents.
That's what I'm thinking. You've got to figure it out in advance.
Yeah, it's very easy to apply that access rights, even if it hasn't been done as part of a workflow. You can set the access rights on the folder, and everything below that folder will fall into it for you. So, yeah, no problem. Great question. Any other questions?
Actually, I have a question for all of you. I'm just curious, by showing of hands, how many of you are actually implementing, at least start to digitize a lot of your paperwork? So fair amount.
Good.
But
Good,
how many
excellent.
are implementing workflow automation to making sure that the manual processing can be taken out? Good amount. And how about the records management component? To have a consistent taxonomy and document classification in place. So a little bit less of hands, fewer hands. So yeah, so those are the key components that taken into consideration when you want to build the information architecture. Really, to think of strategies that how you can capture the information from its birth and its growth path to putting the putting the records management the safety box. It's a science by itself, and in higher education it's not the overnight process. It's really bring everybody on the same page and a lot of discussion, right? And it's a big change behavior project, but you guys can do it, I'm sure.
All right, any other questions, comments? Anyone have any challenges they'd like to share? Keep them close. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. We really appreciate you joining us today. We know that the sessions are over as far as exhibitors is concerned, but if you do have any other questions or want to come talk to us, please join us at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.